Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer. Let's see, mission check. Impossible? Nah, I don't think it's impossible. Our friend Richard Kazimer joins us from the United States. By the way, if you'd like to be Richard's friend on Facebook, Richard S. Kazimer is where you'll find him. Kazimer, by the way, is spelled Kazimer. Speaking of Richard S., here he is now.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Not bad. Now, my friend, one of those things that's very dear to my heart, probably for all the wrong reasons, the issue of telemarketing and phone solicitation in general. Now, we have this wonderful device in Australia called the Do Not Call Register, also known as the P-Off Register by some people colloquially. In my view, the only thing it lacks is the fact that it's not all-encompassing. And the reason why I say that is because politicians can still call you. They'd be the first people I'd knock off the list. Last thing I want is some politician trying to solicit my vote. Second thing is that it also allows people, say for example, like charities and what have you. And I still have this personal objection to anyone being able to call my private phone who I don't wish to call my private phone. It's just one of those funny things I have. What are the rules and regulations in the US in relation to this? Because I think you people are actually to blame for this phenomenon. I think you started it all those years ago. So at this particular point, I blame you.
Well, I tell you, brother, in doing the research on this, I found that few things cause as much consternation to the average U.S. citizen as the dreaded telemarketer. Running right up there on the list is running out of toilet paper late Sunday evening and then trying to get the dogs to stop barking after they've heard Sarah Palin on the TV.
Constant calls from telemarketers and toilet paper would have to have a hell of a lot in common, wouldn't they?
That they do. You know, we pretty much have the same thing as you do. We do have the national do not call list. But looking at the industry, you're going to see why we invented it. The U.S. telemarketing services industry includes about 5,000 telemarketing companies with a combined annual revenue of $18 billion. And that's just the legitimate companies here in the United States. I'm not talking about the boiler room operations that are calling you to sell you every scam under the sun. Now, you mentioned a few of them. The telemarketing categories are telemarketing sales, customer care, technical support, and call answering. Those all fall under that umbrella of telemarketing.
Well, actually, that's interesting because we tend to think of a telemarketer here as somebody who calls you unsolicited. Say, for example, if I've got a problem with my phone and I ring up a company, I might end up in their call centre, but of course that's a call that I have instigated. We tend to think, and I don't know if you have a different definition of it, but we tend to think of telemarketing here as being an unsolicited call that usually involves trying to flog some good or service.
That is true, and that makes up the majority of them. The other categories also, you'll find that if you've purchased an item, if you had any service done, that you will then get a follow-up call to see how the service was and how things are going. That is considered a telemarketing call, and it's not unusual for car dealers at some point, months later, maybe 3 to 6 months after you've purchased a new car, for them to start cold calling you and saying, how are things going? Are you ready to trade up? What can I do to get you into the showroom and look over some new cars and new models are coming in? That's also considered telemarketing, even though you have already provided them that information and you are a customer.
Now that's a very good point. If I can just pull you up there, in that particular instance, which of course doesn't involve cold calling somebody that you might have trolled off some sort of database that you've bought or out of a phone book system or something of that nature, that is from your own customer database. Can you, let's say for example, you go and buy from XYZ Motors your brand new car, but you are aware that a year from now they're going to start hawking you like nobody's business trying to get you to buy the new model. But you don't want them to do that. Can you say to them, okay, I'm giving you my details, here's my, you've obviously got my details because we're doing the purchase of the car, but I do not under any circumstances want you to hawk me for future purchases. Can you do that?
Yes, you can do that. However, you need to specifically say to them, because not often will they give you that option. They're assuming that since you are a customer and a valued customer to them, that everything is fine. Now, I'm seeing more and more where the retailer or the solicitor is specifically putting in language, written language, do you or do you not want to be contacted by us, even including emails to be taken off of that list. But what that does, though, that takes away your phone number for recalls. For example, if something happens with your car. If you take away that number, that may negate them to call you in an emergency situation. So there's a fine line there.
I must take issue with that. I cannot see how wanting to be notified about a vehicle recall, which obviously is a safety issue, and I would also imagine a legal issue, I can't see how that can be paralleled between, well, okay, we won't call you if there's a recall on the car because you're not prepared to be called to be hawked. Geez, mate, I'll tell you, I wouldn't buy that one in a hell of a hurry.
Once you've taken your number off the list, there is no categorizing. This person does not want to be called for a sales pitch. However, we can call them for maintenance updates, or we can call them for something else. The more minutia you have, the more things have a tendency to fall into the cracks. Sometimes there are no gray areas.
No, but what I'm saying is you could say, don't call this person for anything except obviously for something like recalls, which are in a class all by themselves. I mean, a recall, for example, would override everything, wouldn't it? And besides, aren't recalls widely advertised in newspapers and that like they are here?
But not everybody reads them.
Oh, that's their problem. Then again, you'd have a copy of the address of the person that you sold it to, and if you know that XYZ's got this car that's got a recall, you just send them a letter saying, Dear Mr. Jones, your car's the subject of a recall, please call this number, and whatever the fault is will be rectified at no cost to yourself.
But then again, the onus is on the recipient of the call and not necessarily the solicitor. So that's where the do not call, the DNC list comes in, where that's a broad brush approach to do not call me at all forever. I don't care who you are. So that's where that falls in.
I would imagine a lot of people have put themselves on that list.
Yes, they have. The other way of opting out of this is getting yourself a cell phone. Now, more and more people in this country are opting to not have a landline in their homes and use only their cell phones.
Yep.
And telemarketing in this country are forbidden to call cell phones.
Is that right?
So that's the way to get. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, now what's the regulation in terms of that? Because that is not the case here. And I mean, the great dread is when a telemarketing company finally gets your mobile phone number, which is one of the reasons why you list your mobile or cell phone number on the do not call register. Why and how did it come about that telemarketing companies are not allowed to call mobiles or cells in the US?
There's three agencies that regulate telemarketing on the federal level by the Telephone Consumer Protection Act of 1991, that's the TCPA, the Federal Trade Commission Telemarketing Sales Rule, the TSR, Federal Trade Commission. Those are the people who regulate how you do your business, the language that you use, the fairness in how you conduct your business. And then there's the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. That's the agency that regulates radio and television, but it also regulates cell phones because that's done in a open air frequency. So the FCC regulates the cell phone communication, and therefore they're under the auspices of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. So that all falls under that, where that does regulate and bans telemarketers from using cell phones. Also here too, unlike a phone book, a landline, you specifically had to say, I don't want my number listed in a public phone book. Cell phones are not listed publicly anywhere. There is no cell phone registry unless you specifically say, I want my cell phone publicly listed. No one knows what your cell phone is.
But actually, I find that accessing information is not as hard in the US as it is here. It's actually easier to do that.
That's true, and there is what's called data mining, and companies spend millions of dollars each year perusing the internet and trying to track down phone numbers, and then they can trace it to whether or not it's a landline phone, a cell phone. Theoretically, if they find out that it's a cell phone, they won't call you. I've had a couple of telemarketing calls in the years that I've had my cell phone, and once I've told them that this is a cell phone and it's also on the do not call list, I've never called them back. So the best investment I made was getting a cell phone, and I used to get 4 or 5 unsolicited calls a day on a landline, no matter where I lived. A lot of them from foreign lands where English was not their first language, and yet they were representing a U.S. company.
Well, that's always going to be a major issue. Well, what has always been the biggest bone of contention where telemarketing is concerned? Because obviously I would imagine there, as here, it's one of those things where people have thought, this needs to be more tightly controlled, because I know here at one point, for some people, it got to the point where they dreaded their phone ringing because 9 times out of 10 it was going to be somebody trying to hawk something.
Under the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, what it specifically says is that the solicitors cannot call anyone before 8 a.m. or 9 p.m. local time. And I think it's actually been kicked back earlier than that now. I think it's like 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. I could be wrong, but rarely do you get anyone calling you at around 9 o'clock. The solicitor has to maintain their own do not call list, and they have to honor that for 5 years. They must have that national list. If they don't have it and you're on that list and they're calling you, that's a violation. The solicitors have to provide their name. They have to provide the name of the person or the company that they're calling on behalf of. They have to give you a telephone number or an address in which that person who they're calling for or the entity may be contacted. I have never in my life had anyone give me that information, so I think that's a load right there. Calls cannot be made to residences with artificial voices or recordings. It has to be in a human voice. You'll get a call and it'll say, your call is important to us. Please stay on the line. And what it's doing is somebody at a call center who was on the line with maybe 4 or 5 other people, and so you're hanging on for any length of time until they're done, and then they get on with you. Calls cannot be made with artificial voices, as I say, or recordings to cell phones or any service where you're charged.
Did you tell me that you can't look up cell phone numbers?
Did you find mine?
I most certainly did. That's what I was doing. Now, are you in Cambridge, Massachusetts?
I gave that information. So somewhere I gave that information. So if I want to have mine as unlisted or if I want call blocking, I can do the same thing. What you've done is that you found information that I have put out there, whether I intended for you to find out or for a solicitor to find out.
Here's the interesting point. You live in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
No, I don't.
Well, the list here for you is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where you used to live, isn't it?
Did I?
And what it says here is you'd have
information could be very old.
Yeah, but you have to buy. Yeah, you have to buy the information. What it says here, you can get, okay, because it's given. Because obviously I know your phone number, which I've put in, and that's the number that's come up, right? And it says that I can buy a full report, which would include the owner's name and address, household members, and people search results.
Yes, I know those services as well. Where they've accessed that information from is that I have publicly posted my cell phone number somewhere down the line, and they have accessed that. It's my bad. It is my onus. If I don't want anyone to know my cell phone number, as soon as I get a cell phone, I do not post that anywhere. Now, they didn't access that information from state agencies, from where my driver's license or anything like that. So they've accessed that from a common source or a traded source, whether it was a registration for a warranty on something, or if I filled out something at a store. That's how they've accessed that information.
Now, of course, this is the information that obviously people like telemarketers could get, and this is. I was going somewhere with this. The question is, how is it? And you've identified that there could be a myriad of different things that you might have put your name to that have found their way into the system. How is it that you can give people information that arguably they need? Say, for example, if you've bought something that you have some sort of warranty claim, might have some sort of warranty claim, and you want to register yourself as the owner and all that sort of stuff. How do you do that without getting the information flowing into databases like that, which I sit here in Australia, and if I was prepared to pay $5 US, mate, I probably could find out your favourite choice of underpants.
No, you wouldn't. Because there's information out there everywhere. Information is like the ether. It's like leaves in the wind. The more information you give, the more information is available to collect. There is no privacy here.
Do you have any defined privacy laws in the United States at all?
Yes, we do. You have to make a concerted effort for privacy. You really have to start living off the grid and going underground. It's more difficult to do that, to have privacy, than it is to just get on the do not call list. And it's almost like, is it worth the effort? Your information is basically benign. With the do not call list, and also the fact that if you have a cell phone, which probably 90% of Americans do anyway, is that you're not going to get those unsolicited calls from telemarketers. So that eliminates that issue right there. Junk mail seems to be on the decrease because it costs so much to send postage with spam blockers in emails. So I think that our privacy is pretty much protected. I don't know of a lot of people that are having an issue with privacy violations. Credit card theft, identity theft, things like that, yes, that's on the increase because there are a lot of hackers out there that are doing that. But as far as telemarketing is concerned, I don't have any.
Are you seeing and have things like do not call registers? Have they in your country started to show a significant reduction in the number of people who are telemarketing? Is it one of those industries that you would say, by the figures that you're able to get, is on the decline?
Well, according to the industry, making $18 billion a year, they're doing something right. And as I preface it with, those are the legitimate companies that are doing it. So there seems to be a market out there for it. The quality of it is suspect. I'm not sure how many people with the internet are opting to do any of their business through a telemarketer. That's the other thing.
Is it one of those industries that, like here, has become on the nose. That it's just, see, it's the method. It's a very intrusive method. It's like having a salesman crawling right into your face and saying, "Do you want to buy my product?"
Yes. The people that they have that are doing this are low-wage earners. So if you're paying somebody $8 an hour to call 100 people in a 5-hour shift, and if they're able to sell 1 or 2 life insurance policies or whatever, that more than pays for that person's time. So it's all by the numbers. They know that the percentage of people that they're going to connect with that are going to go, "Oh, thank you for calling, I've been waiting for you," is very minuscule, but it's cost-effective to them, so they seem to be making money at it.
What about the number of people who are opting out? See, I have this theory, and I must admit, I'll be honest, it is my dream. Here in Australia, I have a dream that so many people will ultimately put themselves on the Do Not Call register, of which I am a personal advocate for anyone. Oh, have you got yourself on the Do Not Call register? I actually have this dream that we might succeed in putting the whole industry out of business. I think telemarketing is a pox industry. I really do. It crawls into your face, and it's intrusive, and actually, to put it simply, it's just plain rude.
I don't see as much of a public outcry in the past 5 years as previously. I do think that the do not call list has been very effective. Again, going back to the cell phones, I think that has been hugely effective in that the telemarketers are banned. The other end of it is the robocalls from politicians, because politicians' political advertisements and political calls are not regulated under the same umbrella as...
Yeah, I know, we got that problem here. They're the first ones that should be regulated. They should be the automatic ones. I mean, whether we want to receive sales calls, we should be asked yes or no. Politicians should be just an automatic no.
There are a couple of states that have banned that. I believe Indiana and North Dakota have banned robocalls from politicians. You know what a robocall is?
It's a pre-recorded message that just calls every number and goes, "Hi, I'm your local senator, I'm your local congressman," and blah, 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 blah. And usually when it goes, "Hi, I'm your local senator," it would sound something like this: "Hi, I'm your local senator," because I think it would end up at about that point.
Those seem to be an issue, but then only during the midterm and the general elections. That's also cost a lot of money, so the lesser of the candidate, you're not going to see that. The local candidates don't do robocalling. It's usually the state and the national candidates.
You know what I'd love to You know what I'd love to see done on telemarketing? I often talk about this, where they talk about ideas that drive business and all this sort of stuff, and you can get your Excel spreadsheets and say, if we do this, we'll generate sales like this. I've often wondered about, we talk about goodwill, I've often wondered if anyone's ever bothered to try and research what I call bad will. You do something like that, and it really leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth because they don't like it. Here, banks and telephone companies seem to be by far the worst when it came to telemarketing. The moment you could shut the banks and banks and phone companies off, you seem to be able to dramatically reduce your telemarketing calls. But I wonder how many of those people have actually done the research to say, how much does phoning people affect our business? Are we driving business to create $5 extra business, but we're losing $10 from other people who are just so annoyed?
They have. In my marketing experience, that's one of the first things you do is you weigh the pros and cons of whatever your marketing campaign is going to be, including telemarketing. You weigh the irritation factor to how many people that are irritated are actually going to switch their accounts to another bank where they didn't get a call from. So you balance the numbers, and then you look at how much money did we make by irritating people. And not how much money did we lose, but how much did we make?
That tells us everything that's wrong with the whole system, and I've got to tell you that telemarketing is without doubt a pox industry. No question about it. Richard, as always, much appreciated. Thank you very much for sharing with us a dilemma that is faced there, the same as it is faced here. I still blame you for creating it, not necessarily you personally, however, you and your countrymen for creating this thing. We could have done without it. However, we did get our own back on you in many different ways. I do hope you enjoy the pleasure of Rupert Murdoch's company. In the meantime, if you'd like to be Richard's friend on Facebook, Richard S. Kazimer is his name. Kazimer, by the way, spelled Kazimer. My friend, we shall talk next week.
All right, brother. Go beat the boys.